Now it's my pleasure to once again announce a session by SPRIND, the Bundesagentur für Sprunginnovationen. And I will keep it short because Rafael Laguna, the director of SPRIND, and Jano, Costard, the challenge officer of SPRIND, they will announce another new challenge after the Future Energy Storage Challenge they announced earlier this day at the Dome stage. Now we are up for new computing concepts. It's not about quantum computers, or it could be about, no, it's not. So stay tuned, here they are.
Thanks, Wolfgang.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, thanks for coming. I know it's hot and I know it's lunch time, so we're really glad to have you here. Let me spend a few minutes on explaining what SPRIND does so that you get an idea who we are and what sort of the deal is, and then I'll hand over to Jano to explain a bit more how challenges at SPRIND work. SPRIND was created by the German government. Actually, it was an idea already in 2017, but then it takes 2 or 3 years to actually create new agencies. And this is when I was approached to help designing SPRIND, which was built after the DARPA model, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency in the US, which was created in '58 by President Eisenhower, who saw the Russian Sputnik, fly 2 rounds around Earth, and getting an idea that the current institutions obviously are not capable of creating enough innovation to keep up with the innovation pace of the Soviet Union at the time. And so NASA and DARPA was created. Now, DARPA has a D for defense. We are SPRIND, we have no D. We do civil projects, primary use civil projects only. That's a huge difference because a lot of people don't want to work for defense. So we're not defense, you can work for us if you're a peaceful mind. The tools that we have are also different because DARPA is obviously the US. We are in Germany and in Europe, and we have very different rules, which don't make it always easy to create new ways of sort of government support for like deep tech projects that we are doing. So one of the biggest invention of SPRIND is SPRIND itself as a tool, because we're creating new tools on how we finance things. And Jano will explain a little bit how challenges work. They're very different. If you come from the scientific space, you will be surprised how agile and fast our approach is. Now, still, we were getting hundreds of millions of euros to fund what we call the valley of death of deep tech, especially when it comes to hardware. You know that you need a lot of capital expenditures. And we heard, Jan Götz from IQM talk about this a bit, right? You either need access to factory lines or you need to build your own. So when great new deep tech concepts are developed in science, you get funding for maybe 10 years to a technology readiness level of maybe 2 or 3. Now, there's a huge gap to a product where you can get private financing because you've shown that you can productize whatever you've developed. Now, financing that gap can cost hundreds of millions of euros for an individual project. And sometimes you're lucky, like BioNTech and CureVac, they had rich family offices that provided the hundreds of millions to bridge that gap. And just imagine this wouldn't have happened. You wouldn't have had a vaccine, right, for Corona. Now, we want to make this less random. This is what SPRIND is all about. So we want to make this much more systematic, much more visible, much more approachable to everyone in Germany and Europe and actually in the world. As long as you eventually come here to Germany and do your project here or anywhere in Europe, then we're happy to finance it. We want to make sure that great science turns into great products here for us, because a lot of you scientists have to go outside of Europe to create your companies, to create whatever business you want to create. And of course, this needs to change. We're also helping change the ecosystem. So, for example, IP transfer from universities and the big institutes is very hard. And some of you have suffered through this already. And it takes 9 months when it's fast, right? And 18 months or 2 years when it's slow. You get licensing agreements which suck the cash out that you're hard to get from private ventures and so forth. So that definitely needs to change because we're spending tax dollars with the universities and the Fraunhofers of this world. You are the people inventing these things, so it's a product of your brains and your work. So why should it be hard to turn that into an economical benefit for the whole country? This does not make a whole lot of sense. So SPRIND is also working on sort of oiling the machine and making it easier. We do this with 3 tools currently. One is what we call validations, where we can provide you with up to 215,000, to be precise, euros to validate projects that you're suggesting. So sort of, okay, I've developed this and that in my scientific career or in my garage or what have you. And this can actually turn into a disruptive innovation, and we then work with you to ask a few questions that you then work on in your validation agreement. It's like an order, product order. We say we want this validate. You do this validation. Here's the delivery stack of paper, obviously, or virtual paper, and that's it. And you don't have to do a Mittelnachweis or something like that. It's very agile. Number two, once we'll believe in such a project, we're able to provide it with tens of millions of euros. Currently, we use a tool where we found a subsidy of SPRIND. We have to do this to deal with the subsidy law of the European Union, because we can finance 100% of the development. But we make sure that we make agreements with, the inventors. Usually you have a company by then, that eventually this IP can be transferred in a meaningful way to your company. And we're working on making it easier to put money into your companies when you have them already. That's a little difficult at the moment, but we're getting our own law to change this in the next, let's say, 12 months or so that we can do this more easily. And the third tool is now what Jano is going to talk about.
Yeah, so as you heard, the validation funds as well as the subsidiaries we do when we see really exceptional approaches to solve one particular problem, and then we fund those and try to bring them into implementation. And the challenges really go another way in that we see big questions of our time, technological, societal, economical, that we do need to solve. We know that, but we don't know how. And then we start a challenge where many different teams with very different approaches tackle one question at the same time. Some of you, when you hear challenges, might be aware, and we referred to DARPA earlier, that there was something like a DARPA Grand Challenge. That is some time ago, that was in the 2000s, and the question was posed by DARPA: how can we have autonomous vehicles that drive a course of about 150 miles through the desert, really autonomously, so like not remotely controlled? And that was really impossible at the time. They put the money out there to do it. They had several teams at the starting line to tackle the course. What happened was many of them actually blew up. No one made it, and it seemed like a big disaster. They did the same thing the next year, and many of them actually succeeded. And out of that came, for example, Sebastian Thun as the winner, who then came on to be the Google lead on autonomous driving, and then later Waymo, as well as several other people who then, kickstarted the whole ecosystem around autonomous driving as we know today. And as we referred to kind of funding innovation, we also provide really kind of the support and ecosystem around that, because that's really important when you start kind of new products, new markets, actually in new industries, that you got to have an ecosystem around that. And that's really also what is at the center of SPRIND challenges. With SPRIND challenges, you can kind of expect a similar funding kind of sizes as with the other approaches. For example, a question we often get is that something like a hackathon? And the clear answer is no, it's not. It's nothing that you're going to have solved in a weekend. If we pose a question with a challenge and you have answered that and solved the thing over the weekend, either we really asked the wrong question or you are probably a genius, which would be fine. But typically our challenges are multi-year programs with multi-million euros in funding. And that's what we're going to do to really see the hard questions solved and really implement new technologies. We have done that in different areas, in different topics. So we have one challenge running on broad spectrum antiviral agents that really will save our ass actually during the next pandemic, when we don't know yet what hit us and we still have something in our drawers that we can take as medication. That's something that's really unheard of till today. But maybe some of you saw Henrik Dietz on the other stage earlier today, and you know what he's working on, and that he really has a shot at that. Another challenge we work on is called carbon to value, where we need to find ways to suck CO2 out of the air and store it in long-lasting, valuable products to really create a market for that carbon dioxide removal we so urgently need to meet our climate goals. We also announced another challenge earlier today on long-duration energy storage, which will be key to really have a shot at coming up to high levels of renewable energy. And we're going to announce another challenge just now about new computing concepts. And we're going to start that with a short video, which we will play and then talk about right after.
In the digital world of the future, cutting-edge technologies, such as artificial intelligence, support our everyday lives. Countless data are read out by tiny computers, processed and merged into even larger nodes, with more computing power. Huge data centers that take on large tasks, train artificial brains, and solve complex scientific problems. But this development comes at a high price. If global energy consumption for computing and communications increases at the same rate as before, it will take up the entire global capacity for energy production as early as 2040. For a long time, the energy consumption was decreasing, simply because the structures on the chips were getting smaller. This scaling is no longer valid. We need to rethink the way computers work. That's why we need you, innovators, scientists, entrepreneurs. Your challenge? Develop new computing concepts that can drastically change how much of our resources computers consume. Less time, less space, less energy.
So in a way, we've been lured into the digital computing box, if you like, or into the hole by the success of Moore's law that you all know. Digital computing took over the world in the late 70s, maybe. Before that, we had lots of different ways of computing, including analog computing and other architectures. And they were quite, useful at the time until digital became so successful. Now, the architecture of digital computing CPUs goes back to John von Neumann, who developed this architecture in the 40s, actually in the early 40s. So that's a long time ago when you think of it. Not only has Moore's law and the von Neumann architecture created this success, but it's also created its own set of problems that we're all aware of, but we find them normal because we cannot really think about any other ways of computing anymore. And if you're like I'm a software person, and in those 70s, I saw my first digital chips. I think in algorithms, I think in ALUs, I think in bits. This is how my brain works almost in a way. But it's not the only way of computing. Nobody says that you need algorithms to run programs. Right? It can be completely different. Actually, natural computing, you can use water to compute. Like for fluid dynamics, it may actually be pretty useful to do that. But of course, you're building very specific computers if you do that. So what we're looking for is new architectures that solve a lot of the issues that you have with digital computing. One that's not in the film is security. Von Neumann architecture is by nature very hackable, right? Because programs and data really reside in the same space. It's very expensive because we have to move data in and out to the CPU and back to memory, which creates all these energy problems. So there are a lot of architectural core mistakes, we would call it now, that create the problems with computing that we have today. So we're looking for new architectures that are different, that are not von Neumann. They can be digital, but not von Neumann. We're not looking for quantum, and Jano will go a little deeper, because as you've seen, we're happy that there's so much funding going into quantum computing, and that's great, but we're looking for all the rest, so to speak. Maybe quantum computing, you can say, great, that there is a completely new computing architecture, but really it's only the tip of the iceberg. There are so many other ways we can do computing, and that's what we're looking for.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, digital computing, von Neumann computing, was so prevalent that hardly anyone is thinking about really alternative concepts, because frankly, also in the last decades, we really didn't have to, because we had that huge success. Having a versatile machine as powerful as the von Neumann machines was a big breakthrough. And as you mentioned, we've seen that come to an end, or see limitations to that we need to overcome. And that's why we're going to start this challenge now to, in the first stage, find out about new theoretical concepts that really go beyond that. that take a completely different way. And it's really doesn't matter where it comes from. Whether that's neuromorphic computing that some people do, whether that's reservoir computing, whether it's actually molecular computing, DNA, that could be used to compute. We are interested in all these approaches. And in the first part of that challenge, we want to see exactly these concepts developed. That's just going to take a couple of months. And then what's really important to us is that that challenge is going to have a second part where we provide new funding, new measures to then really have a shot at implementing that in hardware. Then in the challenge, as I mentioned, we fund these projects and we provide support, and you can expect different kind of fundings for theoretical concepts and hardware implementation. We are aware of the needs that we see in hardware implementation, especially with regards to the funds required to that. And we are willing to have these ready for you to really develop these new concepts actually then in hardware implementations. What's also pretty much different from any other public funding that you will see in Germany or Europe is that we're not just targeting the audience in Germany. I don't know who of you is from an international background, at least from Europe or beyond, because that's exactly what we're looking for. We are not looking for just the best ideas from Germany. We're looking for the best ideas from Europe and beyond. So that program is also directed at the colleagues in Israel, for example, in the United States, and we seek partnerships like beyond that. Because it's really about finding the best approaches and figuring out whether that works. To go back to that picture I had with the DARPA Grand Challenge, where at the start, a couple of the vehicles actually exploded, that's what we're willing to take as a risk. We really want to see new concepts and then figure out whether that works. We want to really see new ideas, and that's really what this is all about. We are ready to take the risk and actually don't bother you with long pages of applications to a program where you have to prove that something that's inherently risky might or might not work. You have the time during the challenge to show us. So you can expect that the call to be published in a couple of weeks within August, and then have a very short application period actually. So be ready, use your summer vacations to think about these topics. Think about application deadlines of 4 weeks and just a couple of pages. So that's what we pose as your first challenge when you're in the sphere for new computing concepts, and we're really excited to see your ideas.
In return, what you get is a pretty quick reply from us, also within a few weeks. And then once you get a positive notification, you can send us a bill and your money will be on your account after 2 days. And we won't bother you much with Mittelnachweisen and things like that, you know, with stacks of paper where you prove that you actually bought that pencil that you promised to buy in 3 years or something. What we want you to do is spend your time working on the architecture first. And if that then also makes it through the gate, to actually implement that architecture in hardware. You know, at the end of the day, what we want is something that we can put into real machines that change the way we do computing. And if on our way we find that projects are super promising and can be accelerated with lots of money, we still have all these other tools that we mentioned before. So we can fork out at any time with promising projects and give them even more money to accelerate the development. So this is what it is, Wolfgang. If you want to take questions, if there are any.
Thanks for announcing this. And just keep in mind, he was talking about a public organization with a two-day, after 2 days, after you send in the bill, you get the money. That sounds perfect. So are there any questions regarding this challenge that Rafael and Jano just announced? Or are you already thinking about what you will send in, which few pages in just a few weeks? Any questions? Yes, of course, right at the end. I'll jump over.
Yeah, I can repeat the question if you just shout it.
Do you need a proof of concept was the question.
So like for the start of that, for the theoretical concept, no, there's not going to be a proof of concept. Otherwise, the concept is not new. No, we start with really new ideas and concepts, and then we derive the proof of concept from that. Because part of the first part of the challenge is, for example, to derive kind of the simulations and hardware specifications to actually derive proof of concepts from that.
One more question, maybe? If not, yeah, there's one more.
First of all, I guess it's a super great concept to really become into action or to get into action as soon as possible. And I was just wondering, do you have a roadmap? When kind of is there a kind of regular publishment of these challenges that you say something like 3 per year, or is it 5 per year? And do you know already the next ones still up to come?
So,
Very good question.
so we published 2 last year. We published 2 today, and I would say it's going to be these 2 new challenges: long duration energy storage and new competing concepts that start this year. So it will be about 2-3 new challenges each year. And kind of we use the opportunity of great events like that one to really announce these challenges ahead of the call for submissions that we publish. So to give everyone a heads up so that they can think about these questions and then be ready when the call publishes, and you have that short deadline that I mentioned.
I mean, these, like Jano said, these challenges all run multiple years. So we're really building a stack of challenges that are running at the same time. We also do sort of challenge summits or challenge days. We just did them 2 weeks ago in Leipzig for the antiviral agent challenge, which was the first one we launched. There will be sort of the first year's anniversary, and the first cut for the challenge will be in November, I believe, right?
Yeah.
And then it will continue with the winning teams of that cut, and so on. So you will see us running maybe, I guess, 7, 8, 9 challenges at the same time, at any time. And if it proves successful, I'm sure that we will scale up this method. If the outcomes, and we're just beginning, right? We're announcing number 3 and 4 now, but we see how it goes already with the first 2 that we've launched. And as we're getting more mature, I think we're developing really a new way of innovation funding, and I think this will catch on in a big way, not only for SPRIND, but I think also for other departments of the government, for even universities, even maybe VCs or so. So I think we're going to see this tool being used much more.
Yeah, and I would add to that
Shortly.
parts of the successes or parts of what we wanted to achieve with that we already saw. I don't know whether some of you saw the talk of Henrik Dietz early in the morning in the other stage. He's working on DNA origami, kind of folding DNA and give it a function. That's completely crazy concept, and he's developing new antiviral pharmaceutics from that. He would have gotten no funding to bring that into life as a product from anywhere else, so no private funding whatsoever, no public funding to bring that into the product. And we are exactly the partners to take these ambitious concepts and really support them into implementation.
And we all think that's great. Thanks, Rafael. Thanks, Jano, for announcing this
you.
challenge.
Thanks
And
so much.
well, maybe we see you next year on this very stage to announce something more. Thank you. Warm applause for them, or a hot one regarding the temperature.